This is a video by the National Cheng Kung University, Department of Foreign Languages and Literature. This is the second video in a three-part series discussing writing flow and how you can use transitions and linking words to better connect the ideas and arguments in your writing. This video will specifically focus on contrasting points. If you'd like to look and watch a video on parallel points, you can watch the first one. And if you'd like to see a video on cause and effects, or points related to cause and effect, you can watch the third one. In the first one, we talked about parallel points. And so briefly, I'll talk about when it's positive to positive, there's a good thing to a good thing. You can use these kind of phrases. And actually has the same function as of conjunction. Whether or not you use a comma there is dependent on whether that ending phrase is a complete independent phrase. So in this case, it would be like if you include a subject in this part or whether you don't. And in this, for a negative to a negative, bad point to a bad point, you can use this nor to signal that they're both bad. However, if you are trying to contrast points, for example, if it's a positive to a negative, you can use but. And you probably haven't heard of albeit, but here, these plans provide a solution, albeit a difficult one, to our current traffic problems. This is an interesting one because the first point is that these plans provide a solution to our current traffic problems, and then they slide in that second one here, using this conjunction as a transition linking word. If it's from negative to positive, you can use but and then nevertheless. These plans are not easy to implement, but they are nevertheless technically compatible. And a less formal version would be using yet. I don't like tomatoes, yet I like ketchup. So if you have one point and then you're trying to make a second point that is somewhat surprising or unexpected in how or in what it says, you can use these sentence connectors. You've actually probably heard however. You probably already use however. But do note that however is a good thing or positive thing into a negative thing. This, however, tells the reader that you're about to talk about something that's bad or not as good, even though you just talked about something good. And on the other hand, you actually probably just saw in the last slide, nevertheless, something negative, something bad, talking about something good. And here's an example of that. And do note that even though you see a no, that usually signifies that something is bad, but this just means that it's the opposite. When I say something good or something bad, what I mean is like you as the writer, what you're trying to say. If you think something is good and you want to transition to writing about something that you think is bad, you can use however. So in this case, produces no greenhouse gases is considered by this writer to be a good thing, and they signal that they're going to talk about something bad related to nuclear fission with the word however. Likewise, the way they transition into the positive aspect after just talking about the negative aspect is using nevertheless. Still can also be used. It is less formal. And however has many different functions, as you see. Let's say it's a good situation. We're talking about how something works, like these sampling techniques, and then you talk about a problem about that. Or let's say you're talking about earlier research, but then a criticism that you have about that research. So however is very ubiquitous, meaning you can use it in a lot of different places. But do note it's a positive to a negative thing. Subordinators you've probably heard of, meaning subordinate clause, subordinate phrase, dependent clause, dependent phrase. So usually the first point you're making is stuck in this clause, and the second point is in the second independent, fully standalone by itself phrase. So although point 1, comma, point 2, and you can actually switch it around too. So point 1, even though point 2. and prepositions. So in spite of fact 1, fact 2. Despite point 1, point 2. So these are very nice ways of just keeping all your thoughts together regarding the same topic, but pointing out that there is something surprising or unexpected that's different between the two. If you're just pointing out general differences, you can use these sentence connectors. You've actually probably used on the other hand. I've seen some of it in some of the writing. But there's actually subtle nuances between how you can actually, or what these actually signify. In general though, on the other hand is a good one. You can kind of use it in any general sort of topic switch. Here are 3 examples. It might look a little complicated, but bear with me here. So the first one is talking about, let's say you're given an IELTS essay topic, and they want you to compare 2 different viewpoints. So they may not necessarily be opposites. They don't have to be like complete black and white opposites. They could be kind of this gray area where they're not really completely opposite. And on the other hand, is a good way of transitioning between those 2. If you're talking about something with the same feature, which is the temperature on 2 different things, you can use in contrast or by contrast. And usually in this case, the feature, which in here is the surface temperature on the moon and on the earth, is opposite. So in the first one, they are not necessarily opposites. They're just 2 different viewpoints. In this one, they have to be, or at least they should be opposites. So in this case, the moon is really cold, and then the earth is relatively warmer. And then if you have a relationship, so in this case, colder temperature makes a lower sea level, and the opposite, if you have a warmer temperature, makes a higher sea level, then you can use conversely. And these are usually expressed in relationship pairs, so like colder to warmer, or they can be lower to higher. And so it's kind of a switch between the 2. And here's example sentences. We don't have time to go through them, but do pause to take a read of them. Talking about subordinators, you can use while and whereas. So while point 1, comma, point 2. Point 1, whereas point 2. And similarly with that situation. And another one is prepositions. So in contrast to point 1, comma, point 2. Unlike point 1, comma, point 2. So if you're going to challenge a truth, you can use the phrase on the contrary. And basically what this truth means is that you as the writer think that the readers have an assumption about something. You think that most people generally think something, but your argument is actually that something else happens. So their point 1 is the assumption, what they think, and your point 2 is what's actually the truth. So in this case, the writer is acknowledging that the reader probably assumes that carbon dioxide is a pollutant, but they're saying it's not a pollutant. On the contrary, it actually their point 2. And this one's actually from an article I was reading, talking about this actor praising that LeBron was leaving the Cavaliers, and the writer was saying that the assumption that the actor's excitement was because of his love for the Lakers was false. He was saying actually, on the contrary, it was because the actor was excited that his favorite team would have less competition. So on the contrary is actually very nice in kind of pointing out that, hey, I think you're wrong, or I think this common belief or this truth is actually not a truth. And then you can similarly use with contrary to. Contrary to is often used with a negative evaluation. So contrary to the impression is basically point 1. Point 2, like the opposite, what is actually the situation. Contrary to the claims, which is there's point 1, comma, actually point 2. And last but not least, we have when you have one point that's replacing the other point. So I think the easiest way is just to look at examples. So for example, you're writing about transportation in Taiwan. So the quickest way to type it is the main highway. Alternatively, there's the coast route, which is very scenic. So you are using the second point to kind of suggest a different action, a different choice from the first one. So this is, you could say these are, I guess, more neutral, I guess, but if you want to tend to be more negative and where you're replacing the action, you can use instead. Similarly with the prepositional kind of format. Instead of this happening, this thing is happening. The new computer models that look at ocean temperatures instead of the atmosphere show the clearest sign yet the global warming is well underway. So instead of point 1 happening, point 2 happening. You're you're replacing the first thing with the second thing. And that concludes this second video on linking words and transitions. If you'd like to continue on a third video, you can view about when your points are related to cause and effect, and if you'd like to look at when the points are not in contrast but rather in parallel, kind of building on each other, you can look at the first video.